that what we want to happen when the page first loads is we start listening for that event, right? So the event is going to occur on what element? Before we can say add event listener, we need to say something dot add event listener. What are we listening for? What is it we're waiting to happen? Form submission, right? So we need to get the form. I gave it an idea flick form once I remembered to put it there. So how about we grab that? Const form equals document dot query selector hash flick form, I think I called it. Did I successfully get the form? Let's test that much. Yeah, I did. Now, could I have just typed form out here to see if that thing were defined? That didn't work. Why not? Because form is a local variable inside this function right here. It's not defined out here, which is where my console is. Make sense? But you know what would be really cool? What if this were flexible enough that when we call app init, we could tell it which form to use? Like this. What if I said app init hash flick form, and then up here we use what we passed in to get it, so that our app object here with all our methods in it doesn't actually care about our particular markup on the page. As long as you just tell it which form it should grab, it'll grab whichever form you tell it to. So we could call app init more than once with more than one form, potentially. How about it? Why not? How would I do that? So I pass an argument in. How do I get the argument? So inside the function definition, right? Just give that argument a name. I'll call it form selector because that's what it is. It's the selector that's going to help us get that form. And all I'm going to do inside init is add the event listener. I'm not going to do anything else with the form. So I don't think I'm going to bother saving the form to a variable. I'm just going to say document. And I've shown you on the slides before that you can put line breaks before the dot, and it's just fine. For the sake of squeezing it all on here, I'm going to do that. You can do it too if you want. Dot query selector, form selector. And here's why I'm really doing this. Because I'm going to chain another method on the end of that. So document.querySelector is going to actually return the form, right? And we know we could say form.addEventListener. So I'm just going to chain addEventListener on the end of this. And if you're going to do something like that, like chain multiple methods on the end of something, that's a good time to put each method call on its own line. Makes it much, much easier to figure out what that line is doing than if you just have it all stretching out. We grab the element, and then we add an event listener to it. And what event were we listening for? Someone other than Will and Elijah? Sasha? Like you mean it. That's right. Submit. So we just put the string submit in there. And then we need to run something. But we haven't written whatever function we're going to run yet. So let's write a function. And all our functions now are going to be methods on this app object. So let's make a second method. Where do I even start? So init is just a property on an object, right? Just like veggies yesterday. So after it, I just put a comma that I usually put right away. And then I just put another property. It could be breakfast, pancakes. It could be age 38. Doesn't matter. Or it could be another function. Perfectly fine. So let's call this handle submit because that's what it's going to do. Handle submit : and then we could type any value here, and that value could just happen to be a function. And I am going to remember to put my comma there right off the bat. And what do we know we have to do when we submit a form? No matter what it is we're trying to accomplish with that form submission, there's something we're going to do right off the bat every time, pretty much. We're going to prevent the default behavior, right? Otherwise, it's going to redraw the page, and we're going to lose everything. So anytime a function is called as an event handler, an event is going to be passed into the argument list, whether we put it there or not. So we'll name it EV, and we'll call ev.preventDefault. And for right now, let's just put console log submitted. Just to see if we can get this all hooked up right now that we're complicating matters by using this object. So add event listener, submit, and then we need to call that thing. How do I call it? What do I put here? Say again? App.handleSubmit. Will that work? Let's give it a shot. Refresh. Just type anything in there and submit. It says submitted. Yes, it works. Rodrigo. Let's try that without the app dot. Right off the bat, it's telling us handle submit is not defined. You can't. You could if, say, that function were declared right inside this function, because then it would be in scope. But no, since it's a method, you have to call it with a dot somehow. But we would not have to know that it's called app. I would like to be able to rename this variable without breaking its contents. There's got to be some way to refer to the object itself from inside the object. This, indeed. This has some quirks, as we will learn. This dot handle submit ought to refer to it. So when you're inside a method in an object, this ought to refer to the object itself most of the time. Refresh. Type anything. Submitted. It works. So we don't want to refer to app as app from inside app because there's just no reason to couple it to the name of the variable, right? It's a good suggestion, but we're going to do it this way. We're going to use this. Now we really want to get something from the form when we do this, right? I'm still not going to go as far as creating a list item or anything, but let's at least make it console log something that you typed in the form so that we can get these things tied together a little more tightly. I don't think we gave our input a name, did we? We did not. So let's give it a name. Name equals, how about flick name? Fair enough. So back in the JavaScript, inside handle submit, I want to get that value somehow. How do I get it from inside handle submit? We're not going to use query selector, right? Because we have enough context without that. We have enough context without going back to the DOM and grabbing the thing, because the event just occurred on that form. So we don't want to have to know like the ID of the form from inside the function that is handling that form. It ought to be able to know which form it occurred on, right? How does an event handler know what element the event took place on? What'd you say? Target, right? The target of the event object. Did somebody say something else? Thought I might have heard it. We'll see. There is another way that we're not going to use because it gets really confusing. But there is another way. Did you say something? Somebody say it again? It is. Yes. This inside an event handler is always the event target, which is going to cause us some trouble here a little later on. But we're going to get it off of event.target. So if I say, for example, const f equals event.target, how can I console log what's inside that flick name field? f.flickname.value. Yep. Refresh. Step up. Console log step up. It works. So it's not doing much, but by golly, we have our event handler hooked up with an event listener. So when this JavaScript file is loaded, two things happen. This app variable is initialized, and we call init. And inside init, we start listening for that event to occur. Nothing else happens yet. We just start listening. Magic doesn't happen until we submit the form. Questions? Set up event handler for flick form.